What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back here for some more content for you guys. And as you know, Spurs are in the desperate search for a new sporting director since Fabio Paratici has left the club. Yesterday, and the last couple of days, we have been linked with German Tim Steidten, if that's how you pronounce it, by the way. He's a very interesting candidate. First of all, started off his career as a youth scout for Werder Bremen. Then he was head of youth scouting for Werder Bremen. Then he moved on to head of scouting, sporting director, director of football, and then did get a big move to Bayer Leverkusen, where he was head of scouting, and then moved on to be sports coordinator at Leverkusen. And, seems to have done a very decent job at both of those clubs, which we'll get into in a second. But today we will be finding out who is Tim Steidten.
Yeah, and for me, we all know that with all the manager talk, that sporting director is paramount to this search. And we've seen it even at Tottenham in the last couple of years, how crucial getting a really good sporting director with the right vision for the club is to getting him into the club. And someone like Tim Steidten, what he's done at Bayer Leverkusen and previously at Werder Bremen does seem to fit the bill in terms of his eye for talent, his ability to have a vision, and how he approaches getting players through the door and who he selects. Because apparently he's very data-driven, he very much forward-thinking when he comes to selecting players. And that's what we need at this club, because I did feel like Paratici, as much as he was maybe good at getting players in, he was more about the art of the deal. He was getting many players in place. He didn't seem to me like a guy who wanted to have a certain strategy in terms of who was selecting. I think he was more about getting a lot of number of players in place for certain positions and then getting deals done. And that's where he lived. You know, he's always on the phone 24/7. Where it looks like Tim Steidten has a very different approach to that.
Massively so. And what we've been talking about on this channel a lot about bringing in a new manager is innovative approaches. And that's definitely where his strengths lie. You know, he has different kind of approaches for analytical thinking, data-driven approaches, like you say. And that's something that we're clearly lacking at Tottenham, where we don't seem to look at things in a new way of thinking. We're very much of the old way of thinking, and we don't progress the way that we need to progress. And I think that's a massive flaw in why we've been held back for so many years at Tottenham. And we seem to be using maybe a scattergun approach in signings, where he would be very much of the thinking, working with the manager, very tactical thinking of which kind of players to bring in for a specific method of playing. And I think that's definitely a way where he can help us a lot.
And clearly his eye for talent is strong, given his previous track record.
Yeah, and let's go through his track record, because at Werder Bremen, he brought in the likes of Kevin De Bruyne on loan, which went on to move to Wolfsburg and then to Manchester City. Socrates, he brought in for 3.5 million for Genoa, ended up going for Dortmund for 10 million, later on ended up at Arsenal. Yannick Vestergaard, he brought in to Werder Bremen for 4.5 million, who ended up going to Gladbach for 2.5 million, who's now at Leicester, right? Yannick Vestergaard.
Yeah, was at Hampton for a bit.
Gnabry, who he brought in for 5 million, who sold to 8 million for Bayern Munich, and we all know the success story that he's been at Bayern Munich. But I think where he really earned his money was at Bayer Leverkusen. The names that roll off the tongue: Kerem Demirbay, 25 years old, he brought him at 32 million euros. And then from Hoffenheim, Edmund Tapsoba, 20 years old, he brought him in for 20 million euros from Guimarães, and he's now got a market value of 30 million euros. Palacios, he brought him in at 21 from River Plate at 17 million euros. Moussa Diaby, who's really making a big name for himself at the moment, he brought him into Leverkusen at 19 years of age for 15 million euros at PSG, and he has a market value now of 50 million euros. Florian Wirtz, he brought him through the academy at 16. He actually signed him from Cologne under 17s for 200k, and now he has a market value of 85 million euros. So it was actually, he was brought into the Leverkusen academy from the Cologne academy. Then he brought in Patrick Schick at 24 years of age, 26 million from Roma, and he's having an absolutely sensational couple of seasons there for Leverkusen, scoring loads of goals. Jeremy Frimpong, he brought in from Celtic for 11 million euros at 20 years of age, who's now got a market value of 35 million euros. Sada Azmoun, the Iranian striker, brought him in at 27 years of age for 2.5 million from Zenit. He is now worth 12 million euros. And Piero Hincapié, a player that we've been linked with a lot over the past year, he brought him in at 19 years of age for 6.5 million euros from a team out in South America, Talleres, and he has now got a market value of 25 million euros, but some would say maybe even more than that.
Yeah, and I think what's really striking about all those deals is that he isn't just like, he clearly has a good kind of grasp of not just the European market, but looking for deals at maybe less fancy clubs, maybe clubs which you wouldn't expect the talent to come from. And he doesn't just look at the name; he looks at maybe who the players are and what the data says. And if the data proves that he believes that these players are good enough, he goes for them. And it's been clearly an approach that's been working. Like to the fullest for him, because all these players have brilliant talents. They're doing really well this season at Leverkusen. I know things started off really badly. They brought in obviously Xabi Alonso, which he probably must have had a very big say in appointing. He's done absolutely brilliantly as well. So they've kind of married this approach of getting young, talented players for below market value, raising their values as well, selling them on for good value, and also having a good manager in place who can make the most out of all these players and exactly how they want to play. And that's something that we've been missing at Tottenham, I feel. I feel like we don't strategically look at our squad and decide how we want to play and then get players to fit that system maybe in a data-driven way or an innovative way to try and get players. What kind of qualities do we want in a left-back? What qualities do we want in a centre-mid? And very much go for players who have these qualities. I feel like we say like, all right, we want a centre mid who's good in the market, who's available, who do we want? We don't analytically look at what we want in those players. Yeah. And I think that Tim Steidten will not only find players probably to fit how we want to play, you can probably find good value as well. I think you could probably find players who are fairly cheap from maybe markets we don't expect, and maybe get players that can grow at Tottenham.
Yeah, and another big problem at Spurs is implementing the youth and having a clear vision of what Spurs want in the future. And some out in Germany do call Tim Steidten a visionary. He's got a clear path of where he wants the football club to go. He has a clear vision of the future, and he definitely knows how to implement youth and to bring youth through the structure at the football club, which is something that has been desperately missing at Tottenham. You look at the likes of Noni Madueke, you look at the likes of Marcus Edwards, and maybe even most recently Romain Mundle, who could be leaving the club. And when you've got such talent at the football club, it's so vital that you utilise them. And I think someone like Tim Steidten might be so central to maybe bringing that all together and making that pathway between the academy and the first team.
Yeah, and what I like about him as well, from what I can see in terms of the signings he's made, is even like, for example, getting Diaby from PSG 15 million, like he can see there's value in maybe players who are discarded from bigger clubs. He can bring them in and he can see something that they can grow into being a star like he is now. And then he also has people like Hincapié, who got on from CR Teleres for 6 million euros. Like, what Tottenham scout is looking at CA Teleres? Do you reckon we have scouts looking at them? I mean, I'll find it hard to believe that we are. And yet he can find the value in looking at these markets and thinking, look, here's a player who I think can grow by Leverkusen, who the data says could actually be a success. And now he's probably worth a lot of money. And like, he's taught a lot of the big clubs. He's had a great World Cup as well. And I completely agree with you. Looking at the youth as well, we have been so kind of neglectful of our youth system at Tottenham for a number of years now, not giving youth players chances. Even when they've been begging for chances, even when there's space for them to have chances, we don't give it to them. And hopefully someone like Steidten can see the youth players coming through, can actually make judgments on them, and maybe also look for new talent for the next generation as well to bring in, because he's clearly been doing that at his previous clubs. That's definitely been a focus of his. And we clearly have talent in our youth system, but we just don't give them a chance to show it. And they've clearly been showing it in other places. And I think if we have someone like Tim Steidten, who's not just focused, even like Paratici, I don't think he was ever focused on bringing youth through at Tottenham. I think someone like he was
focused on buying youth, but not bringing them through the academy.
Yeah, when you're a team like Juventus, like, their role, right, was to just win the league every single season when he was there. So he was always looking at players to keep them at the top, not looking at players to bring through the next generation. Whereas Tim Steidten has definitely had a different approach. Obviously, he's had to, because he's at different clubs. They have different kind of remits. But I always feel like someone like him is much more suited to the project that we have now than someone like Paratici, who, despite being maybe a good sporting director, regardless of all the other league or whatever things, he was probably a good sporting director in terms of getting deals done and identifying good players. But I don't think he was ever probably the right fit for the kind of rebuild Tottenham needed, where we had to look for under market value players who could maybe be smarter than the opposition, not always look for players who are obvious choices, and have them grow into potential stars. And I think he's perfect for this role.
Yeah, he really well could be. And it's interesting what you say about Hincapié and bringing him in for Talleres, right? Because he one of the quotes that sticks with me from Tim Steidten is that the club need to, his word needs to hold weight within the club. The club need to listen to his vision. And Spurs have been maybe foul of not doing that with previous sporting directors and previous scouting departments at Tottenham. You know, you look at the likes of Kim Min-jae and Kavisha, right? We could have had them for so cheap.
We had Upamecano and Mane in the building.
Even them. But what I'm saying with Kavisha and Kim Min-jae, Kim Min-jae coming out the Chinese league. I can't remember which league Kavisha was in when we were linked with him. I think he was in the Russian league. I think it was. Spurs balked at those kind of signings because they were unknown and untested. But they were recommended to us from our scouting team and from the people that were on the ground working and looking at these players. But Daniel Levy didn't want anything to do with them because they were too much of a risk. If we bring in this guy, or whoever it may be, it doesn't matter who it is, we need to listen to their vision, or we need to bring in the players that they earmark for our football club, and not just say, oh, they're untested, they're going to be a massive risk, don't bring them in.
I agree with that, but I do think, just to counter out a bit on that point, which I completely agree with, but I do think the fans as well can't completely dismiss young players who come for little fees just because of that, because I think we've been burnt by Ng, we've been burnt by Nkudu, these kind of players before, and maybe there's a bit of PTSD about signing young players for cheap money because we always feel like these are backup options. But I think if this guy comes in and he's identifying this kind of talent from maybe unknown places or for cheap values, I think we should be more patient with these kind of players and give them more opportunities and not just write them off if they haven't hit the ground running immediately, or maybe they just because we've signed duds before doesn't mean under this new system these players will be duds, because he's clearly got a track record of finding talent.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's our feelings on Tim Steidten. We both, I think, feel that he could be very good in this role if he's given the tools and the know-how to really excel at this football club, and I think he does have the tools to do it. It's just about if he's allowed to do it.
100%. But the one question mark, I guess, for me as well is he was appointed sporting coordinator, whatever that role is, at Leverkusen. Why did he leave us so soon? He left after 8 months. I wonder. Yeah. I've read a few reports just to see why, and apparently it's unclear. There was mutual decision that he left. Some are saying he just wanted a new opportunity. Why not leave at the end of the season? Why leave in March? It did seem a bit peculiar. So I wonder what that reason was. But clearly, by his work speaks for itself about how he identifies talent, the strategy of the football philosophy, bringing in someone like Alonso and marrying that with the talent, and it seems to be working really well for Leverkusen at the moment. Apparently, other clubs like Liverpool were looking at him before. I think they appointed Edwards, and Chelsea had a really big look at him last summer before they went in a different direction. So he clearly seems someone who's sought after, well thought of, and clearly has a proven track record.
Well, my thinking behind that, because I was reading a bit into what the sports coordinator role is, what it actually entails. And what it actually entails is it's squad organisation. So making sure that you've got a balanced squad, basically. And maybe by the time he left, there was no more work for him to be done in that particular season. So if he wasn't going to stay on for the next season, the squad was already there, so what's the point in sticking around?
Fair enough. And definitely squad organisation has been a massive problem for Tottenham for many years. Many years. Unbalanced squads. We have 4 left backs and 1 right back or something like that. Not enough strikers. Players, we have about 5. Even right now, we have Danjuma, Richarlison and Son all comfortable on the left, and we have 1 player on the right. It's just completely unbalanced wherever way you look at it. And that's something that he definitely has to get to grips with.
At the start of the season, we had 4 right backs. By the end of it, we had none.
Exactly.
With the injuries.
We've had cases as well where, when we signed Steven Bergwijn, when we didn't need a winger, we needed a striker. These are things that have been big problems at Tottenham because of this lack of someone like him heading those operations, I feel. Yeah. So, and I also think Paratici, I don't think he was focused. It didn't seem anyway. He was focused on getting a balanced squad. He was most focused on just identifying talents and getting deals done kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So I think this guy seems to be the kind of right fit. I'll interested to see if there are other names that come out of the hat, but in terms of looking into this guy and what he's done at previous clubs and what his kind of remit would be, he does seem a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you have it. That is our thoughts on Tim Steidten, our latest linked sporting director at Tottenham Hotspur. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. If there are any other names that are popping up, let us know if you want us to delve even deeper into them. But thank you everyone for watching today. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always, come on you Spurs.